Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting live from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. This is the Sixth Sense Society. I'm your host, Krista, here with our producer, Michael, and we are back after a week's hiatus. And we're back with my father, Dr. George Schwimmer, which we're very happy to be back with. If you have not seen our earlier shows with him, I definitely suggest you do. He has been a metaphysician for over 40 years, been studying it, practicing it, and has basically trained in different modalities such as past life, regression, shamanism, and mediumship. And he is the author of over 20 books, screenplays, and stage plays. And so we're happy to have him. But before, and then our topic today, I should say that too, we're going to be talking about guidance and healing. So before we get started, Michael has a few announcements.
Hi, everybody, and thanks so much again for all the support you guys are showing our show. It's really fantastic. And a few of you have bought us some coffees on Ko-Fi, and we definitely appreciate that. That really does help us a little bit with our production cost. And it's definitely a passion project for us. We love doing the show and plan on continuing for as long as we can. And then a little shout out, thank you to Sunset Lodge in Santa Monica that allow us to broadcast from here. Unfortunately, everything's closed down now with the pandemic, but hopefully we'll be up and running again soon. We've got a couple of great shows still coming up this month. Next week, we have Karen Frasca, and she's going to be talking about autumn equinox magic, which is really cool. And then the following week, Nita Kamari will be talking about constellation astrology and family constellation astrology in particular, which is a fascinating branch of astrology. And then we've got some great shows coming up in October. Holly Lindblom will be back, Mystic Mitten, and Madame Zalema and Jackie Smith. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. Get all the information on our website, sixthsensesociety.com, SIXTH, all spelled out. Please subscribe to our quarterly newsletter while you're there. We give, every 3 months, we put out a newsletter with some of our favorite episodes and some other cool stuff we find that we think you'll enjoy. And we're going to have a lot of fun with this show. So I'm going to kick it back to you. So take it away, Krista.
Great. Thanks, Michael. And just a little clarification on Nita's show. It's actually a couple of topics we're going to talk about. One is it's family constellation, which is a healing modality. And she also has some really innovative ideas about astrology that she wants to share, and she's going to be starting a course on. So we're going to talk about those two topics. So welcome, Dad.
Hello.
Hello from New Mexico.
Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Yeah, such a beautiful area. So today you had indicated you would like to talk about sort of synchronistic guidance to your finding healers and sort of related ideas around that. And I think you had a couple of different healers in mind.
Well, a couple of things. I ran across a couple of things in the last few weeks, and they were obvious to me. They were generated by guidance and synchronicity. So I thought, okay, let's talk about that.
So have you in general used synchronicity a lot in your life?
No, it happened. It happened a lot to me back in the 80s, not quite so much these days. But for example, when I started training to be a shaman, I had absolutely no idea or interest in being a shaman. And I was just bored one day. I was in Los Angeles, and I was bored one day, and I picked up the free newspaper to see if there was anything there, and there weren't any movies I was interested in. And then I saw this ad saying Dr. Alberto Villaldo, shaman. And I said, oh, baloney, shaman, schmaman. And I had nothing to do, so I said, oh, what the hell? I'll go and listen to this guy. And I listened to him, and I wasn't terribly impressed, but he mentioned a couple of the books that he had written, and I went to the library and read them, and I was hooked. So there's an instance of synchronicity right there, because I had no interest in going, no interest in shamanism, and I wound up studying for 2.5 years.
Wow. Well, you listened to it anyway. That's interesting. You resisted, but you didn't resist.
Well, this is one of the things that I try to tell people is to pay attention to what crosses your path. You don't know where it's going to go, who you're going to meet, or whatever. Now, Edgar Casey said we plan our lives and we choose our parents. However, we have free will to make choices and change our game plan on Earth. Yet we don't do this alone without direction. I read many years ago that we all have spiritual guides, and I've found this to be true. And at that time, whatever this writer was, he wrote that there were anywhere from 5 to 100 guides. I know I have at least 5, possibly 10, maybe more that I don't know about. And that in addition to the 5, they may come and go depending on circumstances. And so, for example, a president of the United States could have 100 guides because of all the different things he has to do.
That makes sense, yeah.
And then, of course, synchronicity. And I can't tell you for sure as to how this is put into motion, but it's either part of our game plan or the spiritual guides, or as some people joke, universal computer of some sort. The fact is there are no coincidences.
I think Michael has either a comment or question right now.
Yeah, I've brought this up before, and I think Dr. Schwimmer's going to get a kick out of this, but we had an old hippie friend from England in Halifax in Nova Scotia, Mark. He was a character. And he said one day a month what he would do is he would step out his front door and he would look for a sign. It could be a swizzle stick that was pointing in a certain direction or whatever. And he'd say, okay, that's the direction I'm meant to go. And off he would go. And he said then he would watch for his next sign. It could be a little piece of conversation he heard in passing, somebody talking about something cool over there. He said, then I guess I'm supposed to go over there. And so he would literally spend the entire day with no plan, just following signs. And he said, I went to some of the coolest places I never would have thought to go. I met some of the coolest people I never would have met. He said, but he just allowed himself to be guided for an entire day. I thought that was a really amazing exercise. Maybe we should all try that once in a while.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, you would love him. He is really a character. He's just a British man and living in Nova Scotia. Like very magical and just smart too. So you said the last couple of weeks you'd had some things happen to sort of guide you. What were they?
Well, before I talk about that, I want to mention I'd never heard of the word synchronicity until I was in a checkout line at the end of a spiritual retreat in 1978. And I mentioned to a man beside me how I had recently experienced a number of very odd coincidences. And another man just behind me laughed and said, oh, those were not coincidences, but synchronicity, which he said it was a term coined by Carl Jung. So his comment, of course, was an example of synchronicity.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why I first let me mention a delightful example of synchronicity just recently. During my training to be a shaman, I learned a process for obtaining a different perspective on a problem or issue using levels of perception and an assemblage point, which technique could also be used to do divinations for others. And I feel strongly that this, which is a simple procedure, should be used by everyone. And in 2017, I decided to send a set of instructions for this to a former client of mine who had been studying shamanism at that time. So I sent her the instructions, and this is the reply I got back. Quote, "How wonderful to hear from you. Your timing is divine as usual. I am now teaching the Peruvian medicine wheel to students. Currently, I am teaching about the assemblage point, and I love that you sent me a write-up on it. If it is all right with you, I would like to share this with my students." And all I could do was laugh, because because that's about, as
Yes.
obvious of piece of synchronicity as you're ever going to run across. So then also guidance and guides. And the first time I ran across that was in 1978 when I went to the home of a woman who I'd been told knew of psychics in my area. And while visiting with her, she had me meditate, during which I saw a series of ancient-looking open stone entranceways, one behind another, which the lady then told me meant that the way was open for me, though I didn't know at that time open for what. This was just at the very beginning of my spiritual metaphysical journey. And then I at the retreat, I took an early morning class on meditation, and during one session of which I saw beautiful many-colored gemstones being dropped from above into my open cupped hands. And it wasn't until later that I realized that these were gifts of the spirit. And then again, in another meditation at that retreat, I was given a message from my guidance presented to me to look like a telegraphic tape spelled out one letter at a time in my inner vision. So very early on, it was impressed on me that, I had guidance, and that I should pay attention from, whatever impulses I've been getting. Okay. Let me give one example of guidance. Again, you're not aware of, unless you're aware of it, you don't expect these things at all. And when strange things happen, you want to stop and think for a second, where is this coming from and what does it mean? In 1982, I was living in a very rough West Side New York City neighborhood. It was called Hell's Kitchen.
I remember that.
And yeah, I know you do. And you met some of the people there.
I did.
Just around the corner congregated pimps, prostitutes, drug dealers, and addicts. And one day I left my apartment to go catch a subway at 42nd Street. And as I began to walk south on 8th Avenue, which is a filthy street with bizarre denizens, a flyer taped on a light pole caught my eye. And I went over and I found advertised an 8-week course about the human aura and chakras. And I looked around and I thought, chakra training in Hell's Kitchen? Are you serious? It turned out actually the class was held near Wall Street, which is another odd venue, and no one else from Hell's Kitchen had signed up for the class. So that flyer was meant for me alone. And I don't know how that flyer even got there, because the lady who taught the class lived way uptown, and what she was doing walking down 8th Avenue to put up a flyer, I'll never know. So that's the kind of direction I've had all my life, and every one of the things which I learned, the metaphysical things that I learned, plus other things, I was guided to. I didn't go looking for virtually any of these things. These things just crossed my path, and I had enough, sense or sensitivity to check them out. So I always tell people to pay attention to what crosses your path. You don't know what or where or whom it may lead you. And okay.
I think the idea that it can be something so simple as a flyer too. I think sometimes, maybe some people might think you'd get some kind of a grand gesture, and often it's these little simple things that your ego will accept, actually.
Well, for example, the first thing I learned was Reiki. And I never heard of Reiki, didn't have any interest in it, didn't know how to get it, nothing. I happened to go to this retreat, and I went to the retreat because I was looking for psychics, and there was a lot of them there. But while I was there was a 6-day retreat, and they had different trainings in the afternoons. And I thought, well, I'm here, I should go and do something with my afternoon. So I read all the different things that were going on, and I read these things as Reiki, Reiki. What the heck is that? And formed healing. Well, I've been interested in healing, so I thought, oh, what the heck, and that's how I got, involved with Reiki. I didn't go looking for it.
Mm-hmm.
It just, popped in my life as I was living it. Now, getting to what happened recently, which is why I decided to do this particular subject matter. One night about 2 months ago, I couldn't go to sleep. And I finally got up about 2:30. I went to my living room, pulled a book from my bookshelves, and I don't know why I pulled that book off the bookshelf. It was Ruth Montgomery's book, Threshold to Tomorrow. I bought it in 1982. I'm sure I read it then, but I never looked at it again. And now I had no idea what was in the book. I didn't look at the back of the book. I just opened it up and began to read. And the first chapter was entitled Jason Winters.
Oh.
And it turned out to be about a man with severe terminal cancer of the jaw and tongue, as well as a large malignant tumor under one ear, who the book said had cured himself of cancer. So I read on. Jason Winters' former schooling ended at the age of 14. He worked as a stuntman in Hollywood and as a salesman. Then he was selling refrigerators. He had a wife and 5 kids, was a world wanderer, and said he had a ball with his life. Consequently, when he was given 2 months to live, it was a terrific shock. And not only that, but his doctor wanted to remove his jaw and tongue.
Oh.
And when Jason asked if that would save his life, the doctor said no. He still would die.
Oh.
So Jason logically said no thanks to the operation. And waiting to die at home with nothing to do with nothing but time on his hands, he started reading sacred books. And he began to notice that there often were mentions of healing with herbs in these texts. And he identified 3 of these herbs, and he sold his house and went flying around the world trying to find these 3 herbs. And after a while, he found all 3, and he came back, and he brewed a tea with the first one and got absolutely no results. He then brewed the second herb and got absolutely no results. Then the third herb, and same lack of results. And he kept trying them each one at a time, 0 results. And one day in frustration, he mixed all these together and said, what the heck? And he brewed some of this tea with all 3 of them in the water. And here is what he said later, quote, I was busy making tea and drinking it all day long and getting weaker all the time. One morning, I was at my lowest ebb and thought, to heck with it, I'll mix all the herbs together and save time. I made the tea combination, and a miracle happened. I could feel it with the first swallow. Strength seemed to pour into my body. That day, I made a gallon of the tea and drank it all. End of quote. Within 3 weeks, the tumor on his neck had disappeared. In 9 weeks, Jason returned to his job, feeling healthier than he had since his youth, he said. The cancer never returned. Fantastic.
That is, and that's not the only example of someone using some herbal remedy to cure cancer. I've heard of, there was a Canadian nurse, but I forget her name, that had found something out through a Native American. And again, it was a cancer thing, but she was also sort of I don't know, restricted initially because she was, I don't know, not licensed to do it or something like that.
Well, the same thing happened with Jason Winters. He was living in Canada at the time. He was born in England and moved to Canada, and Canadian authorities raided his house and took him away. But before that happened, to make a long story short, when people learned of the tea, hundreds of people lined up outside of his house. 2,000 letters a day were coming in, and Jason had to start marketing the tea without being allowed to claim any health benefits. But it didn't matter because word of mouth took care of that problem. And people flew in from Germany and Australia. As I said, he started receiving 2,000 orders a day with no advertising.
Wow.
And in 1982, when this book was written, 1.5 million people were drinking the tea, and over 1,000 doctors had recommended it. There were 30,000 documented cases of remission of cancer using the tea in the United States alone in 1982. But as I mentioned, when the Canadian authorities found out about this, they raided his house, took all of his stock of tea, and he had to go to the Bahamas to set up a company there where he wasn't persecuted for selling the tea. I don't know how they could do that because he didn't even advertise that there was anything in the tea.
Right.
So, he obviously didn't have any legal assistance because that sounds totally illegal to me.
Right.
But now, actually, Jason wrote that he and at least one doctor, which were mentioned, believe that tea does not actually cure cancer. What it does is purify a person's blood so that the pancreas can produce enough enzymes to devour the poisons in the system. Now, I found a couple of quotes online from patients, which I'd like to read because they're pretty fantastic. I found this one on Amazon. Quote, "We gave this tea to my dad and he drinks it every night. He has been fighting cancer for 2 years and was given only 6 months to live. He is now in remission. Doctors are amazed at how far he has come." End of quote. The next one I found on a page which was put up by the Jason Winters company. Incidentally, the company still in business. They've been in business for 40 years, and it is being run by Jason Winters' son.
Is he dead then?
And so, yeah, Jason is dead. His son is still alive, I believe. I think Jason died something like 2008.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is a lady apparently put this up on this page. Quote, "This week, both my mother and my close friend's mother were given clean bills of health by their stunned doctors. Both were given absolutely terminal diagnoses last winter, both with 2 types of advanced cancer, colon and ovarian, and esophageal and stomach, respectively. After beginning the Jason Winters tea, but before any conventional treatment, both had perfect blood work, including cancer markers, one of which dropped from 500 to 0.7.
Wow.
Neither ever had one symptom of the disease after beginning the tea. Both appeared cancer-free after 3 months. My friend's mom doctor said, I have never, ever, in 30 years of practice, seen a healing like this. Not only were there no signs of cancer, but there wasn't a scar or any other sign of previous surgery. The doctor couldn't find where he had removed her colon.
What?
Part of the colon.
Wow.
He even used the word miracle. Her blood cancer marker is still 0.7, far below normal, another first for her doctor. After only 2 months of conventional therapy, this doc had said, lady, you are looking at a cure. My mother's endoscopy this week was virtually identical. Her doctor said there were no signs she ever had cancer, no scarring from radiation, nothing. They were equally stunned. We weren't. We knew all along they were healed. Several doctors again used the word miracle.
Mm.
Now, that's a fantastic testimonial.
Yeah, it's so specific.
I never read anything like that. So, since my mother had died from stomach cancer and I had a precancerous polyp removed from my colon 2 years ago, I ordered a couple of boxes of tea, began to drink it. And incidentally, it has a very pleasant taste. And I've just ordered 3 more boxes. I'm using that as a possible preventive. It also strikes me that if Jason and the doctor were correct and it purifies your blood, it could help other conditions too.
Oh, sure.
Because it's not attacking the condition. It is cleaning your blood.
Right.
And so I thought, okay, and it's not expensive and it tastes good, so I'm using it.
So are you using the one that has the chaparral in it? I think there's one with the chaparral and one without.
Yeah, I'm using the one with the chaparral in it. That was one of the original ingredients. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I'm doing this show is because I feel that I need to get that information out to people. I guarantee you, there's at least one or more people who are going to listen to this show who are going to be helped by this tea. And so anyway, that's why I. Now here's the synchronicity part about it. During the same time period. Wait a second.
No worries.
What happened here? I seem to have lost. Okay, let me just tell you what happened. While I was, I had ordered this tea, and during this time, one of my previous Shamanic students sent me an email and asked me how I was doing, and just incidentally mentioned that her granddaughter had cancer. And then in a second email mentioned a little bit later, mentioned that her sister had cancer. And so I, of course, immediately sent her all this information. Now, that's a piece of synchronicity also,
Yes,
that
absolutely.
is absolutely obvious. And, it may even involve guidance. The way guidance works is really very, very strange. And it is possible with the guidance that, okay, we got to contact George so he can go and learn about this, and that way she'll learn about what George knows. I mean, the way these things work is just it's strange and very hidden.
It's very true. So go ahead. It's very strange, but things like this tend to happen. One thing doesn't seem to be, the only thing that happens. The more than one thing happens during the same time period. Sure.
And during this time period when this was going on, I ran across another healing modality. Now, my cardiologist had been wanting me to get an artificial heart valve for about 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I resisted. I don't like operations. And so recently, I decided to go online and check out the most recent heart valves and so on. And I really wasn't happy with what I found. There were too many possibilities for things to go wrong.
So before we get into this, I think Michael has either a question or comment.
Yeah, just something real quick. One of our very loyal listeners, Joel, had a question for Dr. Schwimmer and actually maybe for Krista too. And he was interested in information that comes to you through dreams. And in particular, he was saying he had a dream where he had an ex-wife that asked him to go into his house and get an object, which he did. and there was a blue owl in the house, and he has no idea what a blue owl might represent. So he's hoping you guys might know. And it does bring up an interesting question. Sometimes we see things in our dreams, but sometimes it's a symbol, and how do we interpret that? Is probably a good segue into that as well.
Well, Edgar Casey said that if you study your dreams, you will understand the symbology and so on. But it takes you about a year to really, I tried it for a while. I took a course actually from Edgar Casey's son, Hewlin Casey, when I was living in Raleigh. It was a weekend course on dreams. And he told us to tell ourselves to wake up every hour and a half and write down the dream. And I did. I woke up every hour and a half, right on the dot. But anyway, it takes about a year. You have to work at it. You've got to write down your dreams every day, and the minute you get up. And it takes you about a year to understand the symbology. Now, there's different kinds of things. Casey said some of it is just garbage, from the day that just ended. Other stuff is symbolic. Sometimes there's past life stuff. But anyway, and also in terms of symbols, I think it was Jung who was involved with symbols. There are some universal symbols, but most symbols, Casey said, are your own personal symbols. And that's another reason that you have to spend time writing down your dreams every day, so you start understanding what your own symbols are. And I did it for a little while, and I just didn't have the patience to get up every hour and a half and get up in the morning and so on. It's a regular discipline, and people who do it, say it's very useful, but it does take time to go and develop your own personal knowledge of what your own personal symbols are.
Yeah, I would just add that I agree with you on that each, like an owl for Joel will mean something different from me because he associates certain things with an owl. So you want to find out what your association with the color blue and an owl is instead of just looking through books.
Yeah, I think I seem to remember that also a lot of times a figure in your dreams is actually you, but you're seeing it as somebody else. So it's sort of like personifying your problem and looking at it. But
yeah, that's very Jungian. Yeah. In the Jungian interpretation, everything is you.
Well, it's true. It is. But that's what makes it even more difficult to understand yourself, if everything is you. I'll tell you one thing though that's very interesting about that. During that period of when I was in New York from about 81 to 86, and then also the following 3 or 4 years, people were continually mirroring my own stuff. And I remember I had this friend, a lady who was a therapist, and she lived in Connecticut, and she came into New York one time, and we were having lunch, and I started telling her, I don't know, some problems I had or whatever. I was talking away about myself. And she would stop me every couple of minutes and say, "Did you hear what you just said?" And I said, "No, what did I say?" And she would repeat back to me verbatim what I'd said. And she was continually mirroring, my issues back to me. And then I found that other people, I wasn't the therapist or whatever, but other people would mirror their issues to me. And one of the things that I concluded was that the purpose of marriage or any close relationship is for the two people to mirror each other's issues, because you can't see your own issues. So what you do is, as psychologists will tell you, you project your issue onto the other person, and then you can see it.
Yeah.
And so you're projecting these issues onto each other. And the ultimate purpose, I think, or at least one of them, of marriage is for you to dump your issues. And the only way you can dump your issues if you use somebody else to project it onto, so you can see what your issues are.
Very true. And I'm going to add one more thing since you keep talking about synchronicity. The only thing I'll say about the owl is that my mother had a huge thing with owls. She collected them. She had big brown owl eyes. And in the my knowledge of owl as a totem, owls are able to see into your soul and they can see who you really are. And that, I think she had that talent of looking into someone and knowing if they had a good soul or not. And it's such an odd synchronicity that you'd have an owl, because that's definitely something I associate. So maybe it has something to do with your mother or something like that, before we go on to the next healer that you want to talk about, Dad.
Yeah, let me mention one other thing. You just mentioned about looking into the soul. People say there's the old saying about eyes are the windows of the soul. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely true. Because when I was trained to do psychic readings, the first thing that we did, one of the first things that we did was they had us stand in a circle, and then we'd go around the circle on the inside and look at each person's eye and give our impression of what this person was like, what their personality was like. Mm-hmm. And eventually, we were taught to start a psychic reading by looking at a person's eye and seeing what comes out. And you can use this. Anybody can use this if they understand what's going on and if they will look in a person's eye. Now, for me, it was one eye. It was the left eye for me. I don't know. For somebody else, it may be another eye, but you can't look at both of them at the same time. But I would look in the left eye, and I'd get all this information about the person in the present, and then I start getting past life information. Anyway, the point of this is that there is information coming out of your eyes. And many years ago, I read a book by two women who had gone to Russia to find out what kind of psychic work the Russians were doing. And one of the chapters, they wrote about scientists in Russia. They had one of these dark rooms like a Kodak has, where no light can get into it at all, and they found that the human eye emits light.
Wow!
So there is scientific, validation that there is some kind of energy being projected from your eyes. Well, shamans and others tell us that we create our own reality, and I believe that we create it through our eyes. Mm-hmm. That's a personal observation.
That's very cool. So you were going back to the cardiologist, and the doctor had recommended you get a surgery, possibly.
Yeah. So I went to Google. Google is the most miraculous thing that has been invented by mankind. I remember that I give you one example before I go on with this. I bought a writing box, which was made about 1850 when we were in Ireland. The box was probably made in England, but I bought it in Ireland. And the thing was a terrible wreck, and I eventually managed to restore all of it. And on the top of it was a little medallion with the band's name on it, who'd owned it. And it was, what's the first name? I can't remember the first name, but the second name was Newenham, and the third name was Dean. First name may have been Thomas. Anyway, it was three: first name, middle name, last name. And over the years, I had bought this in 1972, I think. And over the years, I always, when I'd look at that and I'd say, I wonder who this guy was. And finally, in 1998, I bought a computer. And a year or two later, I looked at the box and I said, oh, I'm going to put it into Google. I put it into Google, and 10 seconds later, I know who it was.
Wow.
It was a well-known Irish architect. He was very good, and he had some important buildings built in Dublin and also in London. So Google is incredible. There's virtually nothing I have ever not found when I started looking.
That's
So
amazing.
anyway, I put Google into the search engine, and seconds later, the name Antonio Silva popped up. Now, I want to mention something about that because it's weird.
So what did you put in? What words did you put in Google?
That's what I'm about to tell you.
Okay. I thought I'd missed it somehow.
I don't remember.
Oh.
And when I went back, I tried every combination I could find. I put in healer, natural healer, psychic healer, I don't know, half a dozen or 8. I've never found him again.
Wow.
I found him the first time, and I never found him again. So his name is Antonio Silva, Silva, and you have to put in Antonio Silva healer because there's an Antonio Silva who's a wrestler.
Quite different.
Quite different. Right. So I went to a site, and you've got an extensive built-up site, very interesting, and a lot of complex stuff, including some audio stuff. And what I learned was that Antonio's mother had been psychic, and Antonio started healing at the age of 8, giving his father healing, and he is now 66 years old. And on his website, there are testimonials for 24 different conditions, which you can read on the website, everything, including cancer. And so, again, you enter Antonio Silva healer on Google, and you'll go there. Now, what's interesting about him is that when I got to talk with him, he states that he does not do energy healing, such as Reiki. He says he, quote, commands the light. Commands the light. And based on my subsequent treatments from him and my own impressions, I believe he is literally creating, and in this case, recreating. And I'm not using this word creating loosely. I mean what I'm saying. I think he is creating, just as God and other souls created things. He is creating. So this is not energy healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the sense that, like a contractor rehabilitating an old structure, he rips out walls, tears out electrical systems, and then puts in new wiring and walls, to put it symbolically.
Michael has another question here.
Actually, just a comment. We were talking about Google and how Google can answer questions other than the questions you ask. And there was an interesting experience I had when we first moved to California. And my parents passed away when I was 20, 3 weeks apart. When I was born, my mom was 50. And so, fast forward 15 years later, and now I'm a tarot reader, and we're moving to Los Angeles. And this was pre-Google. The Excite was the search engine. And I had that thought that, what would my parents think? Would they be proud of what I'm doing? I know I'm a good person. I know I'm trying to help people with it, not defraud people and whatnot. But, you want your parents to be proud of you. And so I'm looking for something completely unrelated to tarot, and I type it into the search engine. And the first thing that pops up at the top of the list is Simon Turnbull's Super Tarot site. And there was this guy in Australia, Simon Turnbull, that was a tarot reader, and he had this website about his tarot reading. And Simon was my father's middle name, and Turnbull was my mother's maiden name. I almost fell off my chair. So I think there's a real way to use Google to answer questions from the beyond, and it was a pretty cool experience.
That's great.
Well, that's what I mean by guidance. You don't know, how it works, but suddenly, something crazy pops up and it makes sense.
Yes. So, getting back to this, the method of his healing.
Okay. After I received my first healing from him, I felt like my insides had been bulldozed.
Whoa.
And I'll mention a little more about that, but I just want to say that although a lot of the things which I'm going to mention are very subtle, I have absolutely not the slightest doubt, and I'll describe some things, that something was happening to me. And it wasn't, just a psychic impression or a mental impression or whatever. Now, my first session with Antonio was an hour and a half. The first hour is spent on diagnosis. Antonio is also a psychic diagnostician. And I deliberately did not write to him about any of my concerns, physical concerns, and he asked me nothing before he started a psychic scan of my body. And what he told me was that he's going to do a scan and that I should only say yes or no when he mentioned a body part or a region of the body which he said would either have a current condition or once had a condition in the past. And what I recall him mentioning is the heart, the stomach, a side of the head, my back, and a shoulder. I said yes to all but the stomach. So here's what he then asked me to specify what was wrong with the areas he'd mentioned. And I've had a problem with my heart for years, I told him, including aortic stenosis and regurgitation, elevated blood pressure, irregular heartbeat, rapid heartbeat, and for the past year, momentary dizzy spells, which in July had occurred 6 times. Now, the left side of my head was banged against the driver's side window in a car accident in 1999, and I had moments of pain from that for the next year, both on the left side and on the right side. My left clavicle, going back to the shoulder, was broken in an accident when I was 9 years old, but it healed up well. And as for my stomach, as I mentioned, my mother died of stomach cancer, but I've not had any symptoms related to my stomach. The problem with that is I've read that in the early stages, there are 0 symptoms of stomach cancer, and that by the time you start getting symptoms, it's too late and they can't save you, which is another reason I'm taking the tea. Okay. Now, when we finished the diagnosis, Antonia told me to get comfortable, close my eyes, turn on my speakerphone. And what I experienced during the next hour was a warmth, mostly in my face, and then a feeling of a lot of energy in the center of my forehead and the top of my head. And I believe those are your 6th and 7th chakras because I felt that energy in that area, but I rarely feel that energy. But this time I could feel it very strongly in the center of my forehead and the top of my head. So Antonio told me to be careful for the rest of the day, make no effort, whatever, and drink 2 liters of water a day. And as I mentioned, I felt like my insides had been bulldozed. When I later told him I'd been wiped out after our first session, Antonio said, everyone says that. Mm-hmm. My second session was an hour of healing. I told Antonio that my feet had felt numb for several years, especially the soles of my feet. He made a note of that, and I again felt some warmth and energy in my forehead and top of my head, but this time it was less intense. Third session, I felt energy on the center of my forehead and at a spot in front of the top of each ear. So on either side of my head, just in front of each ear, near the top. And in the last session, there was quite strong energy at the top of my forehead and in the middle of my forehead. So this is what I mean as far as experiencing things. The 2 main things were this energy that I repeatedly felt in my head, the top of my head, and then some warmth. And then also after each session, I wasn't quite wiped out, but I felt relatively weak in relation to what I normally felt after the session. So that there's something going on. I can't guarantee what kind of healing is taking place, but there's something happening. Now, I will mention a couple of things that I have noticed since I had these sessions with Antonio. About 70% of the numbness in my feet has gone.
Oh, wow.
And my feet, which had been cold for most of my life, now feel warm. In the third session, I felt like a wind had blown through the left side of my head where I'd banged my head. It just felt airy. And Antonia mentioned this. She said people often mention feeling light or feeling airy after a treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Now my pulse seems stronger and more regular. My blood pressure is now more than 10 points lower, usually around 115/65, and it's gone down as low as 108/68. As a result, I've cut my blood pressure medicine in half.
Oh, wow.
In the last 30 days, I've had only 3 dizzy spells bunched together during a 4-day period, and I've had no dizzy spells in the past 7 days. Incidentally, Antonio says he works on the entire body, and I have an indication of this as the hearing in my left ear, which has had some hearing loss for more than 20 years, seems to be better. Pressure seems to have gone.
Mm-hmm.
So without x-rays and an echocardiogram, there's no way to tell if any structural changes took place. But since alterations in the human energy field manifest in the physical body, additional changes may appear in my body in the coming weeks. I'll know more when I see my cardiologist. But in any case, I think you can see that whatever the results may be, to whatever extent in my case, there was something was going on. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't just like, I sat on the phone for 60 minutes and didn't experience anything. If you go and read his, he has, as I said, he's got a great many testimonials on his website. The one just come to my mind was an NBA basketball player who wrenched his left knee and was healed in a short period of time, and also a major league baseball player who had a problem with his arm, and they give testimonials.
Wow.
And I say a lot of people give testimonials there. So.
Well, part of the Aquarian age, I was reading about the age of Aquarius, which, I think you think it started, and there's different views about when it starts. But no matter what, we're kind of in it somewhat. And one of the things about the Aquarius age is the way we're going to heal is through energy and light. And in Pisces,
Right.
It was more through fluids. So it's
Right.
and there's already evidence of that happening. So it makes sense.
Edgar Casey said that we would eventually heal with light. And, well, listen, what Antonio is doing is actually, and so are Reiki healers, they're actually healing with light, because that's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
The healing energy is some form of light. But eventually, we'll get some kind of a gadget that works.
I had a sort of an amazing energy healer I worked with in Woodstock, and he was self-taught. His name is Paul Grassi, and I was having really bad vampire nightmares again. And I was living near a cemetery, so I think that might have been related. So I worked in a bookstore, and I was so drained. Even I worked into the shop, and the shop owner was really into metaphysics. She'd look at me and say, "What is wrong with you?" And I said, "I'm having these really bad dreams," and I literally would wake up drained. And then after she told me about her healer, and I went to him, and after maybe about 3 sessions, I started having dreams where at one point the vampire turned into light, and it stopped. The whole thing stopped. And he claims to work with the Christ archetype and the Christ energy, and is a self-taught healer. He's gone through his own, I think, issues, and always in the session, I always felt so much energy, and he'd always he never had a set time he'd work with you. He'd just give you what you could kind of handle. So, it was around anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half per session. Then he'd say, "Okay, this is enough for today." But I did really feel the energy, and it also came in my dreams, and it stopped. Whatever was draining me stopped. So it was really cool.
Yeah, well, this is what as far as I'm concerned, validates any healing modality or whatever is, you get feedback. For example, when I did past life readings for 5 years, and after each reading, I would ask my client, was what I told you relevant to your life? And every single person, with 2 exceptions, said yes, it was. And one of the exceptions was an older lady who I gave a reading to at a conference. And when we were finished, she started to go, opened the door to leave, and then stopped, turned around, and she said, well, it's not relevant to me, but it is relevant to my grandson. And the second one was a past life therapist. We were in training in California. Both of us were training to do past life therapy. And I mentioned to some of the people that I did readings. And so, of course, everybody wanted to have a reading. And so I did readings for several people. And one was a woman who was, I don't know, I had a problem with her. We must have had something from a past life, because if I said black, she'd say white. If I say up, she'd say down. And so one of those people, I'm sure you met people like that. And so anyway, she asked me for a reading, and I thought, okay, And of course, when I do a reading, I close my eyes. And when I got through with everything, I kept my eyes closed, and I said, was this reading relevant to you? And she says, no. And my eyes just popped open, because I'd never gotten a response like that. And the woman is sitting opposite me, and tears are pouring down her face.
Oh.
Pouring down her face.
Oh.
Like somebody opened a faucet.
Oh.
Tears are pouring down her face. And I said, okay.
It was relevant.
That's 100%. I've got 100%, feedback from people saying that, something was relevant to them. So this is how you validate the stuff that, is apparently, invisible. Got a moment here, I think.
Yeah,
just
you have
let me mention.
A couple more minutes, yep.
Yeah, I may have mentioned this before about Reiki, but just to give you an idea, again, of feedback. One of the first people I gave Reiki to was a woman who said she had problems with her hips. They were somehow misaligned or something. And I can't remember all the symptoms, everything she was saying. But anyway, I gave her Reiki. And one day I had my hands on her hips, and she's lying there, and, we're both sort of off somewhere. And suddenly she says, your hands are inside my body. And I looked down and I said, no, they aren't. And she said, well, I feel hands inside my body manipulating my hips. I said, okay.
That's amazing.
And then when I was in New York, this lady came by. She was from a health magazine. I can't remember the name. And she said she was doing an article on, I can't remember the name of the healing nurses use, something touch.
Therapeutic touch.
And Reiki, and she wanted to interview me. And I said, okay, come on up. And so she interviewed me, and we're talking about things. And she mentioned that she had just stopped smoking. And I said, I thought, well, okay, she needs energy if she just stopped smoking. So I asked her, I said, would you like to sample Reiki? And she said, yeah. So I first put my hands on her shoulders, and it channeled energy down in there. And then I put my hands on the sides of her head. And what she later wrote was, she says, and then we entered this twilight zone. It felt like his hands were inside my head, gently massaging my brain.
Aw, that's amazing. So we are wrapping up now. We've got the music playing behind, and I just wanted to shout out, my dad has many books on Amazon under his name, George Schwimmer, so please check them out. They're very affordable, and they're very cool. And thanks so much again, Dad, for coming on the show. That was really interesting about the healers.
My pleasure.
All right, and thank you all for listening, and Stay tuned for next time when we continue to explore the esoteric and the obscure together. Have a beautiful week.